Picture this. It's past midnight in the countryside. The air is still. The crops stand tall and farmers are asleep, trusting that the fruits of their labor will be waiting when the sun rises. But out there in the darkness, something stirs. The silence is broken by low grunts, hooves pounding softly against the earth, and then chaos. A sounder of wild boars, 30 strong, bursts through the field like a living storm. Corn stalks snap like brittle bones. Rice paddies are churned into mud. Entire rows of crops vanish beneath powerful tusks and snouts, ripped apart in minutes. By dawn, the field looks as though a hurricane swept through, except this disaster had teeth. This isn't the work of a few stray animals. It's an invasion, a coordinated raid carried out by one of the most destructive and intelligent species farmers have ever faced. And for years, farmers tried everything to stop them. Fences, traps, poison, even helicopters and sharpshooters. Yet nothing seemed to work. The boars always returned stronger, smarter, hungrier. But then, out of desperation, came a solution so simple, so unexpected, that it turned the tide of this centuries-old war. A strategy born from the land itself. Farmers discovered that the key to stopping thousands of wild boars was to dig. This is the story of how the humble ditch became the most powerful weapon against one of the world's most unstoppable animals. To understand the genius of the ditch, you first have to understand the enemy. The wild boar, or feral hog, as they're often called, is no ordinary animal. Stocky, muscular, and highly intelligent. They can weigh anywhere from 150 to 400 pounds. But what makes them so dangerous is not just their size or strength, it's their behavior. Boars are survivors. They live in groups called sounders, often led by a dominant female, and can number anywhere from a handful to over 30 animals. Together, they move like an army. Where one goes, the others follow. And when they descend on farmland, they don't just nibble at the edges. They plow through fields, uproot crops, dig up soil, and leave devastation that takes months, sometimes years, to recover from. Their adaptability is astonishing. Originally creatures of dense forests and grasslands, wild boars have learned to thrive everywhere. They raid garbage dumps on the edge of cities, invade suburban backyards, and cross highways in search of food. Their range has expanded across Europe, Asia, the Americas, and even parts of Australia. Once they take hold, they are almost impossible to eradicate. And then there's reproduction. A single sow can produce 2 litters a year, each with 4 to 6 piglets. Those piglets, within a year, are ready to reproduce themselves. Populations don't just grow, they explode. What begins as a handful of animals can multiply into hundreds in just a few seasons. It's little wonder that across the globe, farmers, governments, and scientists alike describe wild boars as one of the most destructive invasive species in history. But to truly grasp the scale of the problem, you have to look at the numbers. In the United States alone, wild boars cause more than $2.5 billion in damage each year. They rip apart cornfields in the Midwest, destroy rice paddies in the South, and even uproot golf courses and suburban lawns. In Germany, entire vineyards have been flattened overnight, In Japan, boars trample through rice paddies with such regularity that some villages have abandoned farming altogether. And it's not just crops. Boars dig through soil in a behavior known as rooting, tearing up native plants and destroying habitats for other animals. They contaminate water sources, spread diseases like swine fever, and even cause traffic accidents when they wander onto roads. For farmers, the damage is personal. Imagine spending months planting, watering, fertilizing, and tending to a field, only to wake up and find it reduced to mud in a single night. For small families, that loss can mean the difference between survival and bankruptcy. The war against wild boars isn't just about protecting crops. It's about protecting livelihoods, communities, and futures. Over centuries, humans have tried countless methods to fight back, and almost everyone has failed. Take fences, for example. Farmers have built wooden fences, barbed wire fences, even electric fences. But wild boars are strong and stubborn. They dig under, push through, or simply test the fence night after night until it weakens. For a sounder of 20 boars, even the toughest fence is little more than a puzzle waiting to be solved. Then there are traps, cage traps, corral traps, pitfall traps, all designed to lure in the boars with food. And at first they work. A few animals are caught, maybe even a handful. But boars are quick learners. Once they see a few of their own trapped, the rest avoid the area entirely. A trap that works once rarely works twice. Hunting has long been a favored solution. In some parts of Europe, boar hunts are major community events, with hundreds of people joining forces. In Texas, helicopters equipped with sharpshooters sweep across the land, firing down at herds from above. And yes, hunting does reduce numbers, but only temporarily. Because for every boar killed, dozens more are born. Their reproductive rate outpaces even the most aggressive hunting campaigns. Some farmers turn to poison. Desperate to protect their fields, they laced bait with toxins, hoping to wipe out entire sounders. But poison doesn't discriminate. It kills not only boars, but also deer, birds, dogs, and sometimes even livestock. Worse, poisoned animals can contaminate the soil and water, creating ripple effects that devastate entire ecosystems. In many countries, poisoning is now banned. And so, year after year, farmers fought. Trenches were dug and washed away, fences built and torn down, nights spent patrolling fields with flashlights and rifles, only to return home exhausted and still defeated. The wild boars always came back. What numbers don't capture is the stress this constant battle creates. Farmers describe waking every morning with a pit in their stomach, wondering what they'll find. They talk about the hopelessness of watching months of labor destroyed overnight. Some even consider abandoning farming altogether, convinced they can never win against an enemy so relentless. One farmer in Japan summed it up perfectly. Boars don't just eat your crops, they eat your sleep, they eat your hope. It's in this atmosphere of despair that the ditch strategy was born. At first, it was almost an accident. Farmers noticed that boars avoided steep embankments, hesitated at sudden drops, and struggled to climb out of pits. Someone suggested digging trenches along the edges of fields. Nothing fancy, just wide and deep enough to discourage passage. To everyone's surprise, it worked. A ditch only a meter wide and a meter deep was often enough to stop even the most determined boar. Unlike fences, which could be pushed or dug under, a ditch was a physical barrier boars simply weren't built to cross. Their short legs and heavy bodies made jumping difficult. Their instincts told them steep drops were dangerous. And when one boar hesitated, the entire sounder followed. What began as a handful of experimental trenches soon spread. Word passed from farmer to farmer, village to village. By digging ditches in the right places, at common entry points, around vulnerable fields, or even encircling entire farms. Communities began to turn the tide. The genius of the ditch wasn't just in its effectiveness, it was in its simplicity. No electricity required, no maintenance, no expensive equipment, just human labor and the soil beneath their feet. A ditch didn't wear out like a fence, it didn't risk poisoning the land, it didn't require sleepless nights patrolling fields. It was a one-time effort with long-lasting results. And unlike traps or hunting, the ditch didn't provoke adaptation. Boars couldn't learn to jump higher or climb steeper slopes. They encountered the barrier, failed to cross, and turned away. For perhaps the first time in history, farmers had found a solution that boars couldn't outsmart. The humble ditch became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful solutions are the simplest. But this is only the beginning of the story, because the ditch strategy didn't just save crops, it changed lives. From rice paddies in Asia to vineyards in Europe, from small villages to sprawling farmlands, the ditch transformed the way farmers lived and worked. It brought communities together, reshaped economies, and even inspired new innovations in wildlife management. When word of the ditch's success began to spread, it didn't stay confined to one region. From Asia to Europe to the Americas, farmers desperate for solutions started paying attention. And soon, the humble ditch wasn't just a local experiment, it was a global movement. In India, where wild boars were a constant menace to rice and vegetable fields, smallholder farmers began digging perimeter ditches around their plots. Many of these families lived on razor-thin margins. Losing a crop meant losing the money needed for school fees, medical bills, or even food for the year. For them, the ditch was more than protection, it was survival. In village after village, communities worked together. Men and women dug through the heat. Children carried water to keep workers cool, and neighbors rotated shifts to finish quickly. What would have been impossible for one family became manageable for many. And when the trenches were complete, the relief was immediate. Farmers who had lost half their harvests in previous years suddenly found their fields untouched. In Brazil, entire rural districts joined forces. Farmers, engineers, and local officials cooperated to design larger ditch systems that ran not just around individual fields, but along the borders of entire villages. In areas once notorious for nightly raids, boars found themselves blocked at every turn. Farmers spoke of a peace they hadn't known in decades. In Eastern Europe, vineyard owners adopted the ditch method to protect their grapes. Wild boars had long been notorious for raiding vineyards, smashing through trellises and eating ripening fruit. The damage often ruined premium harvests worth millions. After adopting perimeter ditches, owners reported unprecedented protection, saving both their crops and their businesses. And in Africa, though elephants often make the headlines as crop raiders, wild pigs remain a serious threat. Here too, the ditch was adapted, sometimes widened and deepened, not just to deter boars, but to hold back other destructive wildlife. The principle remained the same. A simple earthwork could defend against forces that once seemed unstoppable. The success of the ditch strategy across such diverse landscapes and cultures boils down to a few universal truths. First, it is cost-effective. Poor or wealthy, individual farmer or large collective, anyone with access to tools and labor can build one. It requires no imported materials, no reliance on government subsidies, no constant replacement. The ditch belongs to the people who dig it. Second, it taps into community effort. Unlike traps or poisons that one farmer deploys alone, ditches invite cooperation. When entire villages dig together, the defenses are stronger and more comprehensive. What begins as pest control becomes community bonding, creating networks of trust and resilience. Third, it is sustainable. The ditch does not kill or harm. It doesn't poison water or endanger other species. It doesn't leave scars of chemicals or broken wire in the landscape. Instead, it works with natural instincts, presenting a physical boundary that animals respect without suffering. And finally, it restores hope. For generations, farmers felt powerless against the nightly raids. The ditch gave them control again. It reminded them that even when nature seems overwhelming, human ingenuity can find balance. Consider the story of Arun, a small rice farmer in southern India. For years, wild boars ravaged his fields. Every season, he replanted crops only to watch them destroyed. His neighbors advised him to give up farming and find other work, but Arun refused. In 2017, he heard of a nearby village experimenting with ditches. He gathered his family and a few close friends. For weeks, they dug by hand, carving a trench a meter deep around their paddies. When the work was finished, exhaustion nearly overcame them. That year, for the first time in memory, Aaron harvested his full crop. No boars had entered. The ditch held. When he sold his harvest at market, the income was enough to send his eldest daughter to college. The simple ditch had changed the trajectory of his family's future. Stories like Aaron's echoed across continents. Each was a testament to perseverance, community, and the power of an idea that began with nothing more than a shovel and determination. Biologists studying wild boars confirm why the ditch is so effective. Boars are powerful but not built for climbing or leaping. Their legs are short, their bodies heavy, and their instincts warn them away from sudden drops. Even when tempted by food, most will not risk a steep descent unless absolutely desperate. Furthermore, boars are herd animals. When the leading members of a sounder hesitate at a ditch, the rest stop as well. Fear and uncertainty spread quickly. What deters one boar deters the group. Interestingly, camera traps set near ditches reveal fascinating behavior. Sounders approach cautiously, sniffing the edges, pacing back and forth, sometimes for minutes on end. Then, almost always, they turn away as a group. To the farmers watching, it feels like watching a miracle in real time. The ditch strategy didn't just save food, it reshaped entire communities. Economically, secure harvests meant reliable income. Families reinvested in better tools, more seed, improved irrigation. Children who once missed school to guard fields at night were freed to study. Communities that once lived in fear of poverty gained confidence. Psychologically, the impact was profound. Farmers described finally being able to sleep without fear. They spoke of mornings filled with relief instead of dread. For some, the ditch didn't just protect crops, it restored dignity. Environmentally, the ditches often doubled as drainage systems, reducing flooding and heavy rains. Some even became microhabitats for frogs, insects, and small plants, enriching biodiversity rather than diminishing it. Of course, the ditch is not perfect. In areas with frequent heavy rains, trenches can collapse or fill with water, requiring maintenance. In rocky or mountainous regions, digging deep trenches is more difficult. And in places with very large animal populations, a ditch alone may not suffice. Some boars, driven by extreme hunger, have been known to attempt crossing. While rare, it proves that no solution is absolute. Farmers often reinforce ditches with additional measures, like thorny hedges or simple fences placed just behind the trench. Still, compared to the failures of the past, even partial success is revolutionary. What began as a simple idea is now inspiring larger questions. If something as basic as a ditch can stop wild boars, what other simple solutions lie hidden in plain sight? In some regions, farmers are blending ditches with modern technology. Solar-powered lights along trench lines create additional deterrence. Drones monitor ditch perimeters, alerting farmers to breaches. Sensors track animal movement, feeding data into apps that predict likely entry points. This fusion of old and new shows that the future of wildlife management may not rest solely on expensive gadgets or chemicals, but on clever combinations of human observation, community effort, and practical design. The ditch is more than a hole in the ground. It is a metaphor for human resilience. It shows that ingenuity does not always require wealth or advanced tools. Sometimes it requires nothing more than the will to act, the strength to work together, and the humility to learn from nature itself. In the story of the ditch, farmers reclaimed their power. They proved that even in a battle that seemed hopeless, a solution could emerge. And in doing so, they offered hope, not just to themselves, but to millions around the world facing similar struggles. As the sun rises over fields once ravaged by boars, farmers now see green shoots standing tall, untouched. Where there was once despair, there is now quiet victory. The battle isn't over, but for the first time it feels winnable. The humble ditch stands as a silent guardian's book, proof that even against an enemy as relentless as the wild boar, humans can find a way. This was just one battle won. But around the world, new struggles and solutions are unfolding every day. Don't miss them. Subscribe now, because the next story might just change the way you see the fight between humans and nature.